On a trip to Croatia, a group of friends plan to hike a dangerous mountain. Before they go to the starting point, Fred shows the group the route and tells them that if all goes well, they'll be back in less than 3 hours. With the equipment ready, the group drives off Taissa at the trail, and along the track, Karine tries to liven up the trip with a song. While they sing and have fun, Luca doesn't feel very comfortable around Juam, as she knows that he and Clara have had a relationship in the past. Minutes later, the group reaches the side of the mountain with Fred finding a wall they can climb. Using only his hands and legs, he demonstrates his climbing experience, and after making it through a section without difficulty, he sets up the equipment in a safe spot. After that, Fred throws up a rope so that Taissa can climb with Karine for guiding them during the Clara Gome, and especially Lucar, worried about their safety. But the couple insists that everything will be fine. Migomon then decides to climb first, not only to impress Clara but also to make her boyfriend even more uncomfortable, as he expected. Luca isn't comfortable and afraid to climb. Booth's girlfriend supports him, saying Sheha's done it before and promises to help. The 5 of them then start climbing with Karine, staying last to guide Luca, as this is his first time. Meanwhile, Clara arrives at the top and Guillaume takes the opportunity to talk to her alone, saying that he has heard about what happened at the hospital. Itis then revealed that Clara is a doctor, but during an emergency at the hospital, a patient ended up losing his life in front of her. Guillaume tries to comfort her, saying that she did her best to solve a heme, but the young woman replies that Hugh would have no way of knowing that since he wasn't around when it happened. It seems that the two had a troubled break, but Clara has moved on, while Guillaume still wants to resume their. Finally, when the 5 of them have climbed the first part of the route, Fred gives them more safety instructions. First of all, they should always attach the protection hook to the safety cables throughout the climb. In addition, only 2 people should lean on. Same case as excess weight can cause hooks to come loose and cause a terrible accident. With these guidelines, the group continues along the route while enjoying the beautiful and dangerous landscape of the mountains. At one point, they have to clean the mountain wall using iron clamps attached to the rocks. Everything is going well, but Luca is still inexperienced at it, and nervousness coupled with physical exertion forces the group to move at a slower pace. Even so, in order not to appear weak in front of Clara and Guillaume, the young man tries his best to catch up with his friends. A few minutes later, Fred comes across a huge bridge that has been created to connect one mountain to another. Although the structure is firm, Fred warns them not to look down as they might feel dizzy because of the height. Guillaume doesn't shy away and starts to cross the bridge, followed by Clara, who is impressed by the enormous structure. However, when it's Luca's turn, the bridge makes him nervous and he does his best not to look down, even though Karine advises him to go slowly and keep his balance. Luca is terrified by the height and stops halfway, realizing that her boyfriend is in trouble. Clara returns to calm him down and accompanies him the rest of the way. When they almost reach the end of the bridge, Guillaume helps Clara out and offers his hand to Luca, but he rejects his. Finally, Karine is left to cross, but Guillaume notices that the hooks supporting the bridge are loosening and warns Fred to prevent his girlfriend from panicking. He simply asks Karine to check the safety hook and walks slowly over the bridge. However, Clara Desperezin shouts to her friend that the cable is coming loose and she needs to hurry. Because of this, Karine starts to run over the bridge, but this causes the cable to loosen and the wooden structure begins to give way. Helpless to do anything, Fred shouts to his girlfriend to hold on to the hook, and then the cable detaches from the structure, causing the huge bridge to fall over the edge. Fortunately, the safety hooks remain attached to the cable, but it's only a matter of time before it comes loose, too. Fearing the worst, Fred grabs his rope and throws it towards his girlfriend, who manages to grab the other end with difficulty. Finally, the 4 of them join forces to pull Thera up, and at the last second, they manage to bring Karine back before the cable comes loose. Even so, the bridge is destroyed and the group has no way back. So, all that remains is to follow the path down the mountain before. Luca doesn't like this at all and starts to protest, but Fred tells him to calm down, saying there is no other way. With that, the group resumes climbing the mountain, relying on yet another safety cable attached to the rock wall. However, more arise when Karine realizes that a piece of the cable has been broken, and they can't go any further. The solution is to climb to the top of the mountain with Karine and Fred leading the way so that they can throw the rope and pull the rest of the group up. However, Luca once again becomes nervous and, even though Clara tries to reassure him, the young man begins to load. As a result, Luca ends up slipping off the mountain and hanging by the safety cable with Guillaume rushing to topple him back. At the same time, Fred manages to climb to the top and Rochesto find the way, but can't because of the dense forest blocking his view. With her friends in danger on the mountain, Karine asks her boyfriend what they can do, but Fred is still thinking of escalation. Seeing that he can no longer hide the truth, he reveals that he knew about the dangers of the route, but them anyway. He believed he was capable of overcoming adversity, but things didn't turn out as expected. Karine scolds him for his irresponsibility. But before an argument can begin, Fred ends up stepping into a bird trap. His girlfriend tries to help him free himself, but the trap is too strong, and the steel claws become more attached to his leg. In the meantime, Gome tries to pull Luca back, but his safety cable comes loose, and he too is left dangling. Luca panics and starts shaking the cable even more, with Guam asking him to calm down, otherwise they both fall. With no idea what's going on, Fred keeps trying to break free of the trap, but his efforts are futile. He then hands the rope to Kira, asks her to throw it to save his friend. Karine doesn't want to leave him alone, but complies with his request, and as soon as she finds the three of them on the mountain wall, she throws the rope to them. With a lot offered, the trio climb to the top of the mountain and set off to help Fred. However, he still has his leg trapped and starts to hear sounds around the forest. Believing it to be Karine, heckles out for his girlfriend. But instead of her, a mysterious guy Pearson starts pulling on the chain caught in the trap, taking Fred with him. Seconds later, Karine and the others go to look for him, but all they find is disarmed bear trap. Gome soon realizes that something is wrong, and confronts Karine, asking why they have gone down such a dangerous path, concerned only for his safety. Luca suggests continuing on the path, but Karine refuses as her boyfriend could be in danger. In the midst of their discussion, Clara intervenes saying they will look for Fred anyway. The group then heads into the forest, and calls out for Fred, but they can't find him anywhere. Luca becomes increasingly irritated by this situation, and wonders why he and Clara have decided to go on this trip, because he can't stand the guy's complaints any longer. Guam provokes him, and the two start to fight with Clara, rushing to break them up. However, the young woman ends up stepping on the wrong foot and falls into a huge hole. Karine quickly uses her equipment to climb down the hole, at which point she slips and almost gets hit by a sharp rock. As she descends further, she sees several stakes in the ground and begins to suspect that this is not just a hole, but a trap. When she reaches the bottom, Karine finds Clara, but she has her arm caught in one of the sticks. The young woman asks her friend to help her, and despite the pain, Karine pulls her arm off the stake and helps her climb out of the hole. As soon as she's bandaged up, Clara tells the others her suspicions that someone has set this trap on purpose. Whoever it is, he must also be responsible for Fred's appearance, which only makes Carnivan more nervous. Still, the group continues their search, but everything gets worse when heavy rain begins to fall. Karine can't hide her concern. Fred starts crying in front of everyone, but Clara tries to console Herefrine, saying that they can't give up now. To widen the search, the four decide to split up and go their separate ways in search of Fred. Karine cries out in despair for her boyfriend and is about to give up hope when she feels a strong pain in her chest and begins to bleed. When she looks down, she is startled to see a huge arrow with a rope tied to it running through her body. Seconds later, Clara finds her friend seriously injured. But before she can react, the rope attached to the arrow begins to pull Karine away. Luca and Guayang hear her screams and go to see what has happened, but they are too late and Karine disappears into the darkness off the forest. As soon as the rope stops pulling her, the young woman tries to see who pulled her, but she is with her flashlight. So, using her camera, Karine takes pictures of the place, using the camera's flash to see if anyone is around. In the distance, Chassis, a guy approaching, and when Chet takes another photo, he appears in front of Karine and pulls her by the arm. Shortly afterwards, Clara runs in the direction where she saw her friend by and dragged, but only finds a piece of her shirt hanging from the arrow of a crossbow. Seeing her girlfriend's despair, Luca hugs her and tells her they need to hide in the forest before they too are attacked. After hours of waiting, the rain passes and Guam tells them that they need to move in. The three continue their search for and Karine, and as soon as they leave the forest, they find a cabin in the middle of a huge open field, believing that their friends are there. The trio break in, armed with stones they found on the ground. Inside, they see Fred, unconscious and lying. Unedible, Clara believes that her friend hasn't survived. But when she touches his body, Fred wakes up, but he is seriously injured. The young woman tries to save him, but he starts writhing in pain and leaking blood from his mouth and tall after much suffering. Fred breathes his last and loses his life in front of everyone. Shaken by the loss of her friend, Clara cries and hugs Gome, which makes Luca jealous. Even so, headaches the kitchen curtain and uses it to over Fred's body, weeping for his loss. Faced with this terrible scene, and with Karine missing, Luca says that they need to get away as soon as possible. However, Gome remembers that Fred was flares in his backpack, so he goes after them, as this may be their only chance to call for help. Using a lantern, he goes to look for Thea backpack in the basement of the hut, where he finds several animal bodies changing everywhere. Then he sees Thea Anton written on the wall and deduces that it is the same name as the owner of the hut. In addition, he finds a kind of cage with a bed and around it, several human heads are hanging down. Despite his fright at seeing something so sinister, Gome finally finds Fred's backpack and rushes out of the cellar. When he finds Luca on the other side off door, Gome tells him what he found in the basement and shows him Fred's backpack containing the flares. Luca promptly asks him to take it, but when Guam refuses, the guy takes the backpack by force, pushes him with a kick, and leaves him locked in the basement. After this, Luca tells Clara that they need Togo, but when she asks where Gome is, he refuses and tries to force her out at Thar. However, as they approach the exit, they come across the stranger carrying Karin's body on his shoulders. With just one blow, the man knocks Clara down and starts attacking Luca, punching and headbutting him. The young man tries to defend himself, but the criminal is stronger and slams his head into Thrul, knocking him to the ground. Luque forced to retreat and the man prepares to attack again, but Clara gains consciousness and goes after him. She manages to knock him down and to struggle, but the stranger gets better of her and starts twisting her arms. Clara tries to ask Luca for, but as soon as he grabs Fred's backpack, the man leaves her alone and walks out of the hut with the flare on, abandoned by her boyfriend. Clara tries to defend herself against the criminal, but he knocks her down with an aether headbutt, leaving her unconscious. Minutes later, Clara wakes up, hearing Guom's voice with both of their hands tied by a rope. The young woman tries to free herself, but they soon hear the footsteps of the stranger who ice upstairs, sharpening his knife and body. Soon after, he does the same with Karin's body, covering her with a dark cloth and throwing her on the floor. Knowing that they will be the next victims, Clara and Guom try to get free. But before they can, the lunatic criminal appears at the basement door and starts walking towards them. The guy advances against Gome and starts punching him, but when to help him, the man decides to take her with him to the kitchen. On Sathir, Clara is once again hung up by the guy, and he starts walking slowly towards her, holding a knife. Hearing Clara's screams, Guillaume manages to free himself from the bonds and runs to Sapehar. However, the basement door is locked, and even using all his strength, he can't open it. Clara's end seems near, but then Luca appears in the cabin and rock at the man's head. Furious, the criminal grabs a crossbow and takes off after him, giving Clara the chance to break free and go help. The two of them rush for weapons to protect themselves. But first, Clara says a final goodbye to Karin. After that, Gome hands her a knife and tells Stu to get out of there. But even though she has been left behind by Luca, Clara insists that they must help him. They need to go quickly because Luca is fleeing towards the forest with the criminal right behind, holding a crossbow. During the escape, the young man sees a gondola which he can use to get away from the mountain. Luca rushes to reach the gondola, but he is almost that by an arrow fired by the pursuer. The young man then runs away again, but villain shoots again, hitting Luque in the leg. With no time to remove the arrow, he limps away to save himself. But when he reaches the top of the mountain, Luca realizes that the gondola is still a long way off. Seconds later, the criminal appears and unable to escape. The young man decides to confront him directly. Luca punches the demon, but he grabs his arm and bites him. The man then hits him with several punches until he manages to knock him to the ground and finally strikes the young man in the leg, right on the arrow wound. Despite the extreme pain, Luca gets fury and charges at the man, knocking him to the ground and pulling out the arrow stuck in his leg. He finishes the tip of the arrow to hit Evelyn's foot, who writhes in pain and strikes back with a headbutt. At the same time, he starts biting Luca's neck, who seizes the chance and hits him over the head with a rock. The guy doesn't give up and tries to attack again, but young man strikes back, hitting him repeatedly in the face with the stone. With his enemy lying on the ground, Luca has the chance to finish him off. But instead, the man decides to flee by crawling to the top of the mountain. However, he ends up overbalancing and slipping off the edge, narrowly escaping managing to hold on to an iron ladder. Even so, the ladder begins to give way, and everything suggests that Luca will not survive. However, he is surprised to see Gome and Clara, who reach out to help him up. Guam manages to hold on and asks Clara to help him up. However, when Loic holds out both hands, the guy remembers how Hell left him behind in the basement. Of Thehat, filled with rage, Gome decides to take revenge, telling Clara that Luca is limping and won't be able to hold him for much longer. Realizing what he intends to do, Luca begs for his life, but Gome drops him mercilessly. Unoblato, see what has happened. Clara runs desperately to save her boyfriend, but Guam hugs her, saying that there is no way she can help. What the young man didn't expect was that the Lunatischermit was still on the loose, and half hits him with an arrow, which hits him straight in the head. Seeing Gome spurting blood, Clara screams in terror, but her fear soon turns into a desire for revenge for the loss of her friends. So with the knife that Guillaume had given her in the hut, she sets off towards her pursuer, who begins to reload his crossbow. Before she can, Clara kicks the weapon away and hits the man, who strikes back with another headbutt. The young woman strikes back at a very sore part of the man, but he manages to wriggle free and starts slamming Clara's head against the ground. The young woman pushes him away with a kick and crawls away until she finds her knife lying on the ground. In a last-ditch effort, she lunges at the man with the blade, but he holds her back and starts punching her in the face. In a final attack, Clara pulls out her knife and strikes the criminal in the neck, which begins to bleed rapidly. After this, Clara prepares to deliver the final blow. Booch hesitates and leaves him lying there while she leaves and heads for Finally, after seeing her friends eliminated, Clara has the Chanchetto escape and slides down the gondola off the mountain. However, her act of clemency was a mistake because even though he was completely wounded, Thea Hermit gets up and picks up the knife that Clara left on the ground. Then the sound of a cable coming loose is heard in the mountains, indicating that he has cut the cable of the gondola, causing Clara to fall off the cliff. Days after the incident, only Luca's body has been found, while the rest of the victims are still missing, including the lunatic mountain hermit. So, what did you think of this movie? Leave it in the comments below. And if you liked the video, like and subscribe.